dudes, welcome back to another Dragonball FighterZ video. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different in honor of our 5,000 subscriber milestone that you guys hit here on the channel. And I wanted to ask you guys and kind of bring up this topic of what got you into fighting games, and what kind of sparked your love for this genre that we are all a big part of. You see, for me, both of my parents, they were massive gamers. Like, they loved playing video games for as long as I can remember. I think my very first game ever had to be like Doom, playing it with my dad as a kid. You see, but while my dad liked, the shooting games like Doom, Battlefield, and other such things like that, those kinds of shooters and strategy games alike, my mom pretty much played anything she possibly could. Everything from Miss Pac-Man to Rampage, and even Mortal Kombat, which she would clap my cheeks in, and she was ruthless. She wasn't about to just let me win because I was, a young kid. She was beating me and beating me bad. Trial by fire, they say, If I was a failure and I lost, well then it was get good or get out. No in between. As time went on, I began playing more and more games with my older brother, and I got really into Clay Fighters and Primal Rage, two games that were out, I believe, for the Sega at the time, and I wasn't good at those either. But I still had a massive amount of fun playing them. They were a blast to play. And while I would get destroyed, my love for fighting games kind of began there with those three different games. I also got really big into Virtual Fighter, and I remember dumping hours of my life into that game. But you see, at this point in my life, I was still really young. I still, wasn't able to grasp all the technicalities to fighting games, and I never really, bothered to practice. For me, back then, it was more so about having fun with the game overall. But it didn't take long for me to discover Soul Edge and Bloody Roar. These are two games I fell in love with. You see, my friend brought Soul Edge over one time, and I remember seeing it and being blown away. While I didn't own the game myself, I played as much of it as I possibly could. Because at the time, I hadn't played any game like it. Yeah, I played other 3D fighters, but nothing like this, So since I didn't own Soul Edge, I decided to dump all my time into Bloody Roar and other Dragon Ball games that were out at the time, like the Tenkaichis and the Budokais, and Bloody Roar was a game I obsessed about. I legitimately began practicing in that game, trying to learn as many combos as possible with as many different characters as possible. And that probably was the first game I actually dedicated to learning. And then what's the funny part? I remember one Mother's Day, my mom comes to me and my brother and she's like, "Oh, do you guys want to go to Toys R Us?" I don't know why I gave her that voice. That voice is not at all how she sounds like. And of course me and my brother are like, yeah, of course we want to go to Toys R Us. So she shoots on over there and we end up leaving with a PlayStation, which she totally got not only for us, but also for herself. You see, later down the line, we'd end up with Tekken on the PlayStation. And if you thought my mother's reign of terror from Mortal Kombat was over, you got another thing coming, because she took the opportunity to pick Yoshimitsu and Tekken and clap my cheeks once more. Show me who's boss. I'm lucky she doesn't buy Dragonball FighterZ. If she did, it'd be a wreck. I'd be over. Now, one of the memories that really stuck with me over my years was one time my dad took me and my brother to the arcade. We used to go pretty much every single weekend when we were kids. And my dad would give my brother and I a bunch of quarters to go ahead and spend on whatever machines we wanted. And of course, I would do the Time Crisis and House of the Dead, but I spent most of my time on Soul Calibur. And I remember at the time I had to be like 9 or 10 years old, maybe even 8 years old. And I'm watching these two guys in their 20s go at it in Soul Calibur. I can't remember who they're using, but I go ahead and I take my quarters and I put them on the machine to let them know that I got the winner. So I sit back, I watch them fight, and finally one of them wins. I take my spot on the machine, and I end up choosing Nightmare because, let's be honest, to an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, his design is dope. The round starts, and I start demolishing this dude. I ran through him, and halfway through the fight, my dad ends up walking up, and he begins watching the whole thing go down. I beat the first dude, and the second guy comes up for his beating, and he gets it too. These guys were baffled. They just got destroyed by a kid. I would have run the matches back. I would have given them a rematch, I would have taken more of their quarters, but I had to go home. I couldn't run the set back. And that is probably one of my favorite fighting game moments. That really stuck with me. But you see, little old me was subscribed to one of those gaming magazines, and I began seeing advertisements for Soul Calibur 3 coming out soon, and I started to get hyped about this game. Before the game came out, I remember seeing photos of Raphael, and I wanted to play him. I saw him and I was like, that guy's sick. And then once I got my hand on the game, I tried him and I was like, not so much for me. And that's when I discovered Yoshimitsu. Soul Calibur 3, Yoshimitsu was nasty. The dude had a bunch of different secret attacks that, if I remember correctly, they weren't even on the move list. He had one where he can take a stance, and if you press a specific button, you would do an attack based off of the actual in-game timer. So your attack would change literally every single second, with specific numbers correlating to specific attacks. And it was here that I really began to develop my love for fighting games. You see, I had already fallen in love with fighting games, but nothing quite to this extent. I would spend hours learning new combos, practicing, learning about frame data, going online, seeing what I can find, because social media wasn't big then. We didn't have YouTube videos in order to actually teach us. Sometimes I'd even resort to messaging the people I would fight to see if they knew anything about the game. As the years went on, more Soul Calibur games came out and I kept up with them, but I was never really as into those Soul Caliburs as I was for Soul Calibur 3. So I would play the Dragon Ball games that were out at the time, like Tenkaichi and Budokai and all those, although I never got the chance to play Raging Blast, which I highly regret, but whenever I went to GameStop, I never had the money to afford it at the time. And this trend kind of kept up through the years, and I got into like the Xenoverse games, and then I ended up seeing the trailer for Dragonball FighterZ. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little skeptical when I saw the trailer. I wasn't really too into it because I had tried a different Mortal Kombat, and I'll tell you what, I was cheeks at that Mortal Kombat. It was the one where they introduced Dbfz to the game. I couldn't do just about anything in that game, so it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for 2D fighters. I just couldn't get into them, I thought, you know, 2D fighters just not for me. Maybe I'll stick to 3D fighters like Soul Calibur and Xenoverse and those sorts of games. But I mean, how could I not go ahead and give this game a shot, right? Not only does it look beautiful, it's Dragon Ball, and I've been a fan of Dragon Ball my entire life. So I picked up the game and I sucked at it. I played the whole entire first season without ever learning anything and never practicing. But I found a love with it, and I mean, it wasn't hard to, because once again, these are characters I already know and love, so it was a lot easier for me to get into this. I began taking the game a little bit more seriously once I began uploading YouTube videos for it, and I began actually learning a thing or two here and there. Now, I still am not at a professional skill level, not even close in this game. I'm only Ultra Instinct Sign rank, but this game truly is my favorite fighting game ever. And it's one I really have a blast with. Like, I don't feel like I have to learn everything about this game. I don't feel like I need to be a professional fighting game player in order to have fun with it. And I think that's something Dragon Ball FighterZ does exceptionally well, is it allows you to still have a good time, even though you may not be all that good. Well, that pretty much wraps up my fighting game history and kind of why it is I love fighting games so much. But let me know in the comments down below, what's your story with fighting games and which one is your favorite? If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and become part of this amazing community and watch this video next. Thank you guys for watching, I appreciate it.